Keith? Really? Bueno, good morning, bonjour, welcome back to everyone to the Home of Sustainable Agriculture of the Americas. This is our second year at the COP, and we're really pleased, delighted, Keith, to have a panel with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Canada is one of our most important member states. I've had the pleasure of being in Canada several times in the past year, in Ottawa and Montreal, and then recently with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture in Prince Edward Island, which is a spectacular part of North America. It's a long ways from Costa Rica, where I live, and it has some of the best potatoes, which, Keith, I'm not sure if you know, they export those potatoes to Costa Rica, and in the hotel where I live next to, I have the most delicious French fries that come from PEI potatoes. So you can tell Minister Macaulay about that. So the reason we have this pavilion here is to talk about the importance of agriculture and its contribution to climate change. And so I think the title of this panel, Industry-Led Commitments to Agricultural Sustainability, is key. We look forward to learn from all of you about the contributions of Canadian agriculture, global agriculture with the FAO, and Central America with Guatemala. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Keith Curry.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. And we certainly appreciate the relationship that we have with IECA. And I must say, the whole 2 weeks that we've been here, you folks and your team have put on terrific pavilion presentations, very, very widespread in the topic, the subject matter, but very informal. So thank you to all of your group for not only allowing us to have a panel here, but for what you've done through COP28. It's been great. And so as Lloyd said, I'm Keith Curry, President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and we really appreciate to have this opportunity to talk a little bit more about sustainability, but more so from what's on the ground level and how it's going to be integrated up through the decision makers as we go forward, and actually go forward and go back home and try to implement all that we've learned over the last couple of weeks. So I just want to start by a quick introduction to our panel up here. To my immediate left is Corb Whale, and Corb is the Director of Dairy Farmers of Canada. Beside Corb, and I have to say a special thank you to him, is David Laborde, who is the Director of Agri-Food Economics Division for FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. And he agreed to join us last minute as we had another panel member that couldn't make it. So thank you very much, David, for stepping in. And I'm really happy, given the fact that the recent release yesterday by FAO, hopefully we can dive into that a little bit. Beside David is Bob Lowe, and certainly no stranger to agriculture in Canada. Bob's been a real large voice for agriculture for quite some time. He's also the Vice President of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and he's also the past President of the Canadian Cattle. And then at the far left is, and I apologize if I don't get your last name right. I've been practicing, but I didn't ask you if it was right. But we have Marlene Mazariegos. There you go. Sustainable Manager of the Chamber of Agriculture in Guatemala. So this is our panel for today. I'm really looking forward to bringing everyone together to discuss our views on the sustainability commitments and initiatives in each of the countries that are involved, and I'm looking forward to it. And as I mentioned, we're also happy to hear from David on the new roadmap report that, as I mentioned, was released yesterday. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Corb, and Corb's going to give us a brief little presentation. So Corb, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Keith. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks very much for having me. As Keith mentioned, I'm a Canadian dairy farmer and a member of the DFC board, Dairy Farmers of Canada board. And I think one of the overarching messages I'm hearing at this conference is that we don't want to be told how to do things from the top down. We want to figure things out from the bottom up. And I think that will be the most effective way for farmers to participate in this conversation and to act and to actually make things happen on the ground. And I'm proud to be a member of an organization that has taken that approach. So as a 7th generation farmer myself, we see firsthand what happens on the ground. We know that climate change affects us first. we also know we have a responsibility to feed the world and a responsibility economically to have a viable business in our community, for our family, for our country. So with all of these things in mind, Dairy Farmers of Canada came up with a fairly comprehensive plan to achieve net zero by 2050. We think our industry is well suited not only to achieve that goal, but to help in the broader scheme of things too. The three pillars of sustainability really are of key importance to all of us. On our first day here, I heard a really good expression that you can't be green when you're in the red. And I totally agree with that. We have to make enough money on our farms to do the right thing. But as somebody who's been doing some of these practices on my farm for decades now, you can do both. You can achieve both at the same time. I'll give you an example. We built an anaerobic digester 10 years ago to process the manure on our farm, to process food waste from manufacturers in our community. So we've removed on our farm 10,000 tons a year of food waste from the landfill. We turn that into green renewable energy, electricity, and heat. The byproduct of that is digestate, which allows me to fertilize all of my fields and about half of my neighbors' fields with no commercial fertilizer. I use the bedding, the solid digestate from the digester back in the barn as bedding. And we can really create a very good circular economy right on my farm. And it helps not only myself, but it helps my neighbors, it helps our food processors, and in the end, the local economy. So there's lots of examples like that we can do. I think our organization, Dairy Farmers of Canada, the advantage we have is that we're well organized, we're a national body, so we can set some of these standards, create some of the goals, help farmers implement these practices on farm through a whole series of best management practices, and communicate that effectively. MRV has been an acronym that I have learned and now remember what all three letters mean since I've been here. And that is a huge part of it. We have to be able to measure, we have to be able to report, and it has to mean something to our consumers, because in the end, it will be our consumers that make the decision. We need to create a product that they want, and we need to do it in a responsible way. And I think dairy farmers are working really hard in Canada and around the world to be effective producers of good, nutritious food in a climate-friendly way. So it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Corb. And yes, I agree. The dairy farmers setting that net zero target has been a wonderful thing, and a lot of organizations have followed suit. A lot of livestock commodity organizations have followed suit. And some of that has come out of the fact that, in the last number of years, livestock has been kind of demonized in the carbon climate change conversations, and certainly our next speaker knows all too well how much the beef industry has been really targeted. But they flipped it around, and they've been doing a lot of great things on sustainability. So, Bob, I wonder if you can just address the audience about all the good things that the beef cattle industry is doing in Canada.
I thought I was third. No, we're, as Keith said, I'm the past president of the Canadian Cattle Association and the vice president of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And we've set, as the Canadian industry, we decided, I think it was back in like 2012 or 2013, that the conversation was moving to more sustainability, and carbon was becoming a fairly big thing. So we decided, well, we know that we need to produce more to feed the world, and we know we're going to have to do it with less inputs, with less stuff. We formed the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef in 2013, I believe, or 2014 was the official start of it. And we immediately, first thing we did, you can't improve what you can't measure. So we did a life cycle analysis of the beef industry in Canada at that time, with the commitment to look at it, see where we were weak, see where we were strong, redo this 5 years later, which is finished now. They're in the process of putting the data together, and we'll actually see if we've done anything. One thing we did do, we set a carbon reduction goal, I guess you want to call it, of 33% by 2030, which aligns very closely with the GRSB's goal of 30% by 2030. The means that we're going about doing this, it's carbon reduction. It's also coupled with carbon sequestration. It's reduced carbon output is what it is. Science brings a big thing in there. There's numerous genetic trials going on in Alberta. 10 years ago, nobody was concerned about methane. Now it seems everybody's doing a methane research trial. we're doing one at our own feedlot actually, which is looking very promising. I think methane's going to be an easy thing to work on in the end. Probably the biggest thing that we've learned to reduce the carbon footprint of the cattle industry is increased productivity. The more you can produce with the same amount of inputs, the less carbon intense it's going to be. Thus per kilogram of meat, you're putting out way less carbon. We need more kilograms of meat. The FAO report roadmap said that. We need to produce more food. I call beef one of those foods. I guess the science, one thing we've initiated in Canada, haven't initiated, we're working on a grasslands conservation initiative, which as industry we've coupled with Nature Conservancy of Canada and Ducks Unlimited and the CCA to come up with somehow some sort of a means of protecting grasslands. Protecting and possibly restoring grasslands, which are probably the best carbon sink there is. We're losing grasslands in Canada at the rate of, I think, 170,000 hectares a year, native grasslands. That's, I believe that a couple of years ago, the World Wildlife Fund classified the Great Northern Prairie as the #1 most endangered ecosystem in the world. We're trying to address that. The more grasslands we can save and protect, better for carbon, better for biodiversity, better for water, the whole gamut of things, and we're realizing the importance of it now. I don't know, we have numerous programs. It'd be nice if our life cycle assessment had have been done by now, so we could bring it here and if it was good, tell you guys. If it wasn't good, improve more. We aren't perfect. We realize as the beef industry that we have a ways to go, but we're working pretty hard at getting there. So, thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Bob. And I know you refer to it often as you know, beef producers are truly in a circular economy, and you'll probably get into it later. And the other aspect of what you talked about, for those of you who haven't seen it or don't know about it, the Guardians of the Grasslands is a fabulous documentary talking about what Bob just spoke to, and the care and taking care of the grasslands, because you know, we look at corn and soybeans and wheat and other crops, and we are meticulous in how we raise them and grow them. But grasslands are no different. They're a crop as well that need special care. And so I think a lot of people have been educated on the need to continue to foster that growth of the grasslands for the betterment, not only of the beef industry, but for climate change as a whole. So thanks for those comments, Bob. Maybe Marlene, I'll move to you next. I know you have a video that you're going to play, but we can maybe move to our next two speakers that are very important to agriculture, more specifically farmers, but are not actually farmers themselves, but play an integral role. So Marlene, maybe if you just want to kick it off, I know you have a video you would like to start with, so maybe if you want to do that first.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. I don't have a video, I have a presentation. Yeah, thank you, Keith. Don't worry.
Potato,
Yeah,
right, Mary?
they're really scared about it. What video? They just got scared. So good morning to everyone. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for this space, to the AICA Pavilion, and then to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. And then I wanted to use my PowerPoint to present what is the Guatemalan Chamber of Agriculture. So I don't know if they have my presentation. Yeah. Oh, over there. Don't worry. It's okay. So the Guatemalan Chamber of Agriculture represents 14 agribusiness organizations. You can find coffee, sugarcane, banana, rubber, cardamom, cattle, poultry, forestry, and also pork industry, and among others. So we are 14 business organizations. We represent we represent this movement initiative called Somos el Agro. We are the agriculture, and we represent an advocacy for more than 28 agribusiness associations and organizations of farmers, exporters, cooperatives, food industry, transport services, supermarkets, and other actors. As agricultural sector, we provide more than 1 million jobs in Guatemala, and we represent more than the 40% of the Guatemalan total exporters to the world. With this vision, we are the agro sector. We develop and make a sustainability in the sector and well-being to build a better future. That's our vision as business organization. And the Chamber of Agriculture formulates its sustainability strategy with these three pillars that we already have been talking here: people, planet, and of course, productivity. And then under this strategy, we formulate in 2013 our climate and environmental policy in 2013. And it has three components: that it's environmental law, compliance, protection, conservation, and preservation of the environment and mitigation of climate change, and a social dialogue with other multi-sectors actors. Then I will tell you this is not just a compliment for the Chamber of Agriculture, it also for its partners. So I get here three examples of them. We have the National Organization of Coffee, ANACAFE, and Grepalma, who is the palm oil sector, and also the Banana Independent Producers, APIV, three other of our partners who also have their own sectoral policies on climate change. So we believe that the implementation of the best agricultural practices not only increases productivity, it also contributes to conserve the environment and create prosperity to all. So today, we wanted to present 6 cases. I will try to be really brief because I don't want to bore you everyone. So these cases, the first of it is the satellite monitoring of the sustainable development of palm oil production in Guatemala. The palm oil sector made an analysis for its 37,000 kilometers in Guatemala. These areas are of operation of the palm oil agro-industry and surrounding areas, and it estimates the palm oil that the cultivation represents only the 0.67% of the total deforestation at the national level. Unlikely of other producing countries, in Guatemala more than the 90% of the plantations have been established on the land with low carbon and are not related to deforestation. The second case I want to share with you, it's the Guatemalan sugarcane agro-industry. It's important to mention that there are activities that generate emissions, but also there are other activities that reduce these emissions or avoid them. For example, the case of the Guatemalan sugarcane industry that absorbs or stores CO2 from the environment, which it needs to grow the sugarcane. The sugar agro-industry also has natural forests that store CO2. And in Guatemala, the sugarcane generates also clean energy. It represents almost the 32% of energy, clean energy, and it provides to the national matrix. Then the Guatemalan Coffee Organization, like I said, for example, that it's important to remark that in Guatemala, the coffee sector is the largest agroforestry system in the country, with 100,000 producers. And in the case of the rubber industry, we represent also 45 million trees in the national context. All of our partners also have environmental and labor compliances auditing system. This is the case of the independent local producers of banana. And my last case is the case of the Guild of Chemical Agriculture, Agriquima. It has an important program who's called Clean Field, or Campo Limpio in Spanish. This program deals with the management of solid waste use in agriculture. It is also part of the watermelon indices, so it's important for us to match them. And then with this program, the farmers properly disposed of the pesticide containers, and Agriquima, who is the chemical guild, collect all these containers to get them out of the field. So I wanted to share with you these six cases and leave you a QR for you to have further information if you want to know more about them. Thank you, Kit.
Excellent, and for anyone who's of my vintage, in my younger days, this actually would have been considered a movie, even though it was a presentation. So, but just some quick takeaways from that. Certainly, 71% renewable energy is fantastic, and I love that catchphrase of when you sow knowledge. That is excellent, and I think one of the other key phrases I took away from what you just presented, and it's something I've been hearing on behalf that the farmers have been presenting the whole 2 weeks, is that connection with consumers and that conversation with consumers. So I'd be curious, maybe if further on in the panel we can even get into how you're managing to do that, because that's a big part of how we get that communication piece out to farmers, but to consumers and what farmers are doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kit.
David, right on the heels of the FAO roadmap report that came out yesterday, we're really pleased that you could join us today, and I wonder if you could maybe just speak to that a little bit.
Yes, thanks, and thanks for this opportunity. So yes, yesterday we released what I will call the first volume of the roadmap, because our starting point is to say it's going to be a process, because the world is pretty complicated, and we should not start to oversimplify it. And what we propose this year is basically what we call the global vision, showing how we can combine food security and nutrition targets that are still the primary goal of the agri-food system. It's about feeding people and feeding people well, and making sure also that people that feed other people have a good livelihood. And no country is going to compromise this compared to other objectives. But actually, we can do it in a way that accelerates and contribute to the climate agenda, both on mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And we should not forget about the last part, even if we want to talk about mitigation and reduction of GHG. Even in a 1.5 degree world in terms of global warming, a lot of adaptation is going to be needed. It's not just an happy place to be. Farmers are going to be impacted, crops are going to be impacted, new pests and disease, so there is a full agenda also to have on that. But the goal is really to have an integrated strategy to combine these two things, to not have this polarization about, it's the farmers versus the planet, or it's about feeding people or cutting trees. Actually, if we do things properly, but also if we accept to spend more money in the agri-food system, we can do it. But also we have also some behavior to change. So in this first report, you will see this vision with the message that actually, yes, we are not doomed, we can do things, but we have to act, and to act quickly, and also making sure that during this process we are inclusive, and what we talk about is the just transition principle that will be about also reducing inequalities. Inequalities within countries, across countries, because a lot of the problem we face today are about that. So it's true today that some countries are overusing fertilizer, and other countries are not using enough fertilizer and degrade their soil. And if we want to be able to feed 10 billion people on this planet, we need to address it. So there is this question of just transition that will imply increasing productivity and efficiency, and making sure that we rebalance our priorities and spendings. And what we do after is we present 10 domains of action that have 120 actions as total and 20 milestones. So I'm not going to cover all of them, but just to zoom in on a couple of them. There is one, obviously, on livestock, because it's very important for nutrition, very important for livelihood, and very important also if we want to tackle mitigation. But as you know, or you may know, the level of heterogeneity in the world is huge. If you compare basically the 20–30% less efficient country in terms of producing milk compared to the top 30, we are talking about a ratio of 1 to 10 in terms of emission per liter of milk. And really, we have to bridge this gap. Because, of course, we can ask the best students to do a bit more, but we have to take care of, actually, the pastoralists in Kenya and Ethiopia and other producers that are not going to disappear from an economic and social point of view, but also the African population is going to double. Of course, large producers like New Zealand and Canada can contribute. They are not going to feed 2 billion people, okay? So investing in these places is going to be critical, and that we have to plan this actively. You have also a domain of action that is about changing diets to make sure that they are more healthy. But here also, it's not one size fits all. In low-income countries, actually, you need to increase the amount of animal source food that poor people have access to, because that's, when you are a kid, the first source of nutrition is going to be milk and meat that when people are going to mix in your porridge. But today, what they have is just a bowl of porridge of maize, and that's major problem of undernutrition. But on the other part of the planet, yes, we need to adjust what we do and to inform the consumers, to make sure that the consumer is ready to pay for what he has on his plate, to make sure also that the public sectors adopt right procurement, in the sense that, school feeding program, for instance, or you integrate with local producers, how to make sure that kids have a good, diversified food that will also change their perception for the future. But we have also more transversal action, like reducing food loss and waste, that can also take different shape in different places. Investing in data, in particular, how we measure emission, making sure that farmers have tools to measure emission, and that these tools are recognized even at the global level, that we don't start to have more and more trade disputes that can even deter investment. So that's very important, because if we don't measure, we don't know. So that's very important, what you say. But it has to be done with farmers, not something that come from the top. And for instance, also, when we think about policy, social protection programs are very important for consumers, but also for producers. How you provide them risk management tool. And I will say, last but not least, you also need to invest in education for farmers, because asking more and more to farmers means that they need to be trained, they need to be scaled up. In Europe, most of the farmers now have the education level of a master's degree, even if they don't go through a formal level, but they need to understand regulation, accounting, emission, agronomic practices. So when you do a skill equivalency, it's like a master's student. When obviously in many other places in the world, you still have a high level of illiteracy from farmers. And they will not be ready to enter in the world we want. And similarly, we need to invest in PhD in agronomics, in veterinarian science, to tackle the challenge of tomorrow. So, and that's not, what farmers or even industry have to do. But there is this all enabling environment that government should take care of in order to have the assets. And at the end, basically, we come with 20 milestones that some are about this data measurement, some are about deforestation, and we say we're clear, at one point, by basically following the Glasgow Declaration, in the next couple of years, we have to stop net deforestation globally, and in 10 years from now, we have to stop gross deforestation. But also for livestock, we have basically just 2 milestones. Is one on productivity and one on emission reduction. And we say that after, people decide how to get there. But that's the kind of, things. If the world can increase productivity and reduce emission, we are on track. How? That's decisions that have to be taken at a much more local level. And even within a region, you will see different production system, different cost. We are not here to micromanage things. Of course, we have a list of options, but this will have to be done at the country and regional level. And that's why also we talk about a process, because bringing this global vision to regional and country level actions, but it has to be done by local stakeholders and fine-tuned. So that's the big picture.
Wow, you packed a lot of stuff in there in a short time. I mean, a lot of stuff. Thank you for that, and certainly, you know, you started off with having that global vision aspect, and I think where a lot of agriculture commodities are looking, and certainly you just heard from Corb and Bob talking about, we're going to set the roadmap because we want the policymakers to catch up with us as opposed to them setting the targets that may not be realistic. So. You know, when you talk about the education piece, that's critically important. But education isn't just for consumers. It's also for those that are making the decisions on our behalf as well, to make sure that they fully understand what our needs are. And I love the fact that you talked about changing diets based on access, not on a particular type of diet. I think that's critically important that we were able to change people's diets. From a food security aspect, I think that's critical. And I got a whole bunch of other notes here that I wrote down too, but I'll save that. And I want to go back to Corb and Bob and even Marlene from the aspect of there's a lot of great initiatives going on in agriculture around the world, but at the end of the day, nothing happens unless you get buy-in from the farmers. And I wonder, I'll start with you, Corb. I'm just wondering, what has been the reaction of your farmers, your producers, and did they have any concerns or hesitation in getting in and give you feedback on that? Did you get quick buy-in? Did it take a big sell? Just maybe talk a little bit about the farmer and their reaction to the initiatives that you set out.
Yeah, sure. I think it's an ongoing process. So to talk about this like it's a done deal would be a little bit disingenuous. I'm really happy to hear that you recognize the differences between farmers and locations and climates and communities and cultures, because I think that is crucial. And even within a country like Canada, when we've got 7,000 kilometers from coast to coast, every farm is different. And things that work well on my farm don't work well 100, 200 kilometers away. So I think it's really important that farmers have a menu of options that they can start to choose from and do a better job on their farm. As we talk to dairy farmers across Canada, and I don't know if this is true around the world, I've heard a few people say that farmers don't like change. I've heard a few people say that farmers always change. I think that farmers are always evolving. We figure things out the best way we can, but we don't like to be told what to do and when to do it. So give us an option, and I'll figure out what's best for me. So I was really happy to hear you say that. And I think that is the message we're getting loud and clear from our farmers. We understand we've got a responsibility in this. We love a challenge, but I don't want somebody to be dictating from the top down how I address the challenge on my farm. So as we start to talk to farmers and you give them some of that perspective and we give them a bit of global perspective, and we know that our consumers want us to do this, we know that our governments want us to do this, and we have a responsibility to the international community, there's buy-in. And there's 10% buy-in right away. They want to know how, when can I start, how do I get going? There's 10% who put the brakes on and will never want to make a change, but we're talking to that mushy middle. And the mushy middle is where the opportunity lies, I think, in our industry. And it's fun as a person like me who's tried a bunch of things and not always successfully. There's been successes and failures on my farm. I can openly talk about the failures. You learn from me and do a better job when you do it on your farm. And that really speaks to farmers, because they're a little bit nervous to try new things, to be the first out of the gate. But if somebody else has tried it and you can learn from somebody else, then they'll adopt that on their farm. So it's an ongoing challenge. There's going to be an evolution to this process. But if we can adapt individual solutions to individual farms, I think that's the best solution for farmers across the world.
Great. You're right. Farmers don't like to be told to change. It's not that they don't want to change, right? That's kind of a human thing for sure. So Bob, you know, the beef industry's really been leading in Canada on sustainability initiatives. You talked about being a decade in with the Sustainable Roundtable, but just think back to when you started down that road and what kind of response you got from the beef producers in Canada. How did that look, and compared to where it is now? So maybe while you're thinking about the answer and they're fixing the mic here, Bob, maybe Marlene, I can just move to you for now and just talk about how the farmers in Guatemala have been adjusting to the sustainability programs that the commodities have been initiating.
Thank you, Keith. Well, at the initial time, there was a lot of doubts because you have to be financial sustainability. It's not that easy just make the change. So they had some doubts at first, and so resistance, but you have to show them what's the, the cost of not implementation, these good practices, and then you have to show them good practices, as he already said. They don't want to be the first one, but then when they see the examples and it works, so they go along with that. And now we have a lot of good practices. We are leading as good practices in agriculture, even worldwide. So for us, it's really important now, the sustainability. We focus on the three pillars: people, planet, and also the productivity. Uh, Today I show you six cases that are really good practices, not only in our field, not only in Guatemala, it also good practices worldwide. So now it's working. They look around and they see that they are leading like agricultural sector around the world.
I like the phrase you mentioned about showing the cost of not implementing these initiatives. I mean, as farmers at home, when we're buying new machinery or new seed genetics or livestock genetics, we're looking at the benefits, but we're also looking at what's the cost of maybe not upping our game. So that I love that phrase. Well, so Bob, is your microphone working now?
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
I'll just start off to Corb's point about 10%. Well, my version of that is 20% lead, 60% follow, and 20% wonder where the hell everybody went. 10 years ago, or 10 or 12 years ago, when we started this process with the roundtable, and I was probably one of your typical bottom 20%. And I remember the initial meeting of do we need a roundtable or do we not? My vision of that was it would be a bunch of producers telling everybody what we're going to do. And I'm a person far brighter than me sat me down beside somebody from the World Wildlife Fund, and I said, I'm not going to sit there. I just drew a wall. Because she forced me to sit there, it developed into a very, very good relationship with the World Wildlife Fund. It's interesting how this process goes along. I think we've all learned that our best way to get what we want is to talk to other people, and we often find out that we're all talking the same language, just in different words. And when you build the trust and the knowledge of, I'll call it the other side, you find out that there are no differences. We all want the same thing. In the roundtable's case, it's composed of civil society, it's composed of businesses, all types of businesses, processors, farmers. Come to the table, and do you agree with everything that everybody says? No, but at the end of the day, you come out with with an idea that everybody can live with, and it works. And the more you do this, the more trust you build, and then pretty soon the questioning ends. We talk about 10 years ago, I would never have thought of feeding dragon fruit to cattle. We feed about between 25 and 50 tons of vegetables to cattle every week, because it's stuff that humans don't use. Cattle can turn it into a very good protein. 75% or 25% of the land mass in Canada is used for cattle, and we get accused of taking up too much land. That land cannot produce anything but stuff that cattle eat and turn into protein. If you take the cattle away, I won't say it's wasted land. You still have your scenic views, but you aren't producing the food that we all know we need to produce.
I see a new marketing slogan, Bob. Vegan cattle.
Have you ever watched a steer eat a dragon fruit? That's interesting.
I'll bet you it is. But there, experimenting, exploring into new opportunities on being more sustainable, you know, the door is wide open. I mean, not many people would think about feeding cattle vegetables, for example, even though it's a more common practice than people realize, right?
We actually did a YouTube video, and we were pretty scared to release it because we thought that what would come back was consumers would say, there they go again. The cattle industry is feeding food that humans can eat to cattle. It's wasted again. What actually came back, there was not one negative comment. One person actually said, I'm really glad to see that the cattle industry is finally feeding their cattle a balanced diet of fruits and vegetables. Whatever works.
And one of the other points you made rings so true. I mean, I've been doing this stuff a long time, and if you really want to get into a very, very colorful conversation, go to a coffee shop with a bunch of farmers and bring up the term environment NGOs. It'll be quite an experience, that conversation. But I believe we've matured a long way. Both sides have matured a long way. To your point, Bob, that they understand us better, and we certainly understand them better too. So David, I'm going to turn to you right now, and just in thinking about some of the initiatives that you heard presented today, you know, do you see the roadmap not only aligning with how those initiatives are playing out, but actually benefiting those initiatives going out? I realize it's early days, and not a lot of people have had time to absorb, but given that you are from FAO, I'm sure you had a lot of insight on the development of it. So how do you see the roadmap fitting into some of the initiatives that you heard today?
No, so for us, the roadmap is really here to provide an umbrella to, as we said, it's very wide in terms of everything that has to be done by different actors, different ministers, different countries, different players. But when we have this umbrella and this coordinated vision, we know that all of this initiative is what is actually changing the world. I mean, the roadmap is not going to change the world. It's people doing action on the ground that are changing it. And they take different shape for different commodities with different innovation. What we want to raise is awareness about, you know, the enabling condition that will make this possible from a regulatory point of view, from even, you know, farm policies, how you encourage also adoption, because we know it's taking a risk, and sometimes it's a success, it's a failure. We want a system that help people taking more risk. Especially also when you are a young farmers, you may face even additional challenges. And this solution has to come from the public sector, in some case, to provide a framework. But the action and the innovation will come from, the framework comes from the public sector, but the action will come from the private sector, and that's what we want to foster. And I think that what has been said before so is important. I don't want to undermine the COP process, but it's not what is discussed here that is going to deliver what we need tomorrow. Because we have a sense of urgency. You know, we cannot wait 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years to say, oh, now we can change things. No. And in some cases, yes, government are going to catch up. But we need to come with concrete solution and demonstrate success, you know, and that's why, you know, measuring things is important. At one point, you need evidence. We cannot just say, okay, look, we have nice cows here and it looks good. No, we need evidence and show that people have taken commitments, have made efforts, and when we cannot, because sometimes the world is difficult, then we need to revise the strategy. Is another sector that is going to make more efforts? For example, on the methane pledge right now, it's not the livestock that is going to do 75% of cut in 7 years, but the energy sector say, we can do 75%. So when you combine both, then you can get the 30% cut. So at some point, you know, you have some sectors that do more, and at some point, it will take, because we have new innovation, a new wave can take place. And that is how, once again, the roadmap play a role of giving the big pictures and trying to show that everyone has a role to play. And at one point, everyone has to be focused also, you know. We have the overall strategy, and it's nice to talk about agri-food system and all of that. But after you have an agreement on that, specific people take specific action on the domain they know.
Yeah, jump in.
Just a quick comment if I could. I think you're right that things won't be changed necessarily by COP, but bad policy can really affect change. So if our governments take bad policy out of some of these discussions, it can really slow us down. So that, from a ground perspective, that's what worries us a little bit. We want to influence that policy discussion so that the policy promotes good practice. It doesn't impede practice that's already doing well on the ground. So I think that's why, as a producer, it's interesting to be here and to be a part of the conversation. And we really hope that our ministers are taking some of those broad umbrella approaches that you're talking about and not specific. The methane pledge will reduce methane by this much, thou shalt. And then we get that top-down approach, which gets people's heels in the ground and probably not the result that we want in the end. So I think you're right. It doesn't necessarily make things better, but it can make things worse.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Just want to add a little bit to what you said, Corb. Our job is to talk to our governments at home before they ever get here, so that when our governments get here, in our case, the Canadian government, they're already talking what we're talking. By the time it's here, it's too late. And I think that we've, judging by what's coming out of this, we've done a pretty good job so far.
Well, and I think, Bob, that speaks to the global vision that David talked about, for the roadmap. We need to be visionaries, thinking ahead, looking ahead, planning ahead, so that everybody has to catch up to us because we're doing a good job. So great point, great point. So, I'm, as someone who represents Canadian agriculture, I'm certainly very proud of what our industries are doing within Canada on sustainability initiatives. And so I'm gonna ask Corbin, Bob, and Marlene a little, because you certainly presented some fantastic initiatives going on in Guatemala as well. Maybe I'll start with you, Corb, but maybe if you can give some advice as to what can other countries do? What have you learned along the way of the development of these programs and now the implementation of these programs? Is there any advice that you can give to other countries around the world on not only the benefits of doing sustainability initiatives, but how to get them over the fear of starting that process? Because sometimes I think the fear of the unknown is the biggest part of our barrier. So maybe if you just have some comments on that.
Yeah, sure. It's probably a little early to reflect, but I think what we've learned so far is to have a bold initiative and a bold strategy and a bold plan. It actually rallies your producers behind you. So we may not have all the answers for 2050, but we know where we want to be. So I think I would encourage other countries to pick a bold plan and then work on backfilling it from behind. I think that bold plan needs to be a bottom-up approach. I think producers need to be in on it. So, for example, one of the things that Dairy Farmers of Canada did really well was we involved farmers from across the country. So we had a big farmer working group. We would bring ideas and ideas and strategies forward. The farmers would comment and talk about the reality of implementing those strategies on the ground. So we had this back and forth feedback as we're developing a series of best management practices for our farmers. So that's another one. It can't be dictated to. It needs to be developed and developed with people who've tried different things on the ground and with people who are willing to try but haven't yet. What's it going to take for you to implement something on your farm? So to me, it's that consultation process. Pick a bold plan and then consult and figure out what's going to work best in your industry.
Yeah, I mean, experience comes from doing and making mistakes. So the more we can give that advice out, the better. And Bob, certainly not only has the Sustainable Initiative been a decade old in Canada, but you're also part of the Global Roundtable as well, and moving that into an international space. But is there any advice that you would have based on your experience in both those initiatives that maybe you could give to countries that are looking to dive deeper into sustainability?
I think that our job in Canada will go, we're pretty good at what we do, and we've been doing it for quite a while, and we have looked at ourselves in the mirror and said, this is what we need to improve on. I think the biggest thing, and that's kind of the same thing as the GRSB, you need to be transparent completely with everybody that you're talking to. Don't try, and I had one girl ask me a question at a panel yesterday. She said, basically what she was saying is you're greenwashing things because I didn't talk about feedlots. So, our Guardians thing has been accused of greenwashing the industry. That's not the intention of it. We need to talk about the whole industry, everything from the processing, which if you've ever been in a packing plant, it's not a pretty place, but they're doing the best things that they can do too. Our job is to move it forward through initiatives like the Global Roundtable, move our knowledge and spread it out around the world so that to give, I guess, other countries and other organizations the confidence to go forward, because we are moving forward, and here's how we did it, without getting into a whole bunch of details.
Yeah, farmers are inherently fearful of transparency for whatever reason. I guess maybe it's the fear of having a finger pointed at them, but you're bang on. Transparency is the key to really moving this forward.
We have, you know, in Canada for a long time, we've had our biosecurity measures. Transparency and biosecurity have to learn to work together because you need both of them. But biosecurity, a lot of people took it as nobody's allowed to see anything. And that's absolutely the wrong way of going about it.
No, fair point. That's a great point. Yes. So, Marlene, I know as the Canadian Federation of Agriculture president, we've been, a big driver within the World Farm Organization, and one of the aspirations of WFO was to get Latin America in particular more engaged with the international body. And so maybe just talk a bit about what you see driving some Guatemala sustainability programs to spread those through the southern hemisphere, basically Latin America and South America. How do you see your programs being transferred into other areas of Latin and South America?
Yeah, what we have been learned of all this process, first of all, is that sustainability is a process. Second, we looked at the agro sector already have good practices in sustainability for a long time, so it's not a new topic. So we just are afraid of showing up, of the transparency, of giving good practices to the world that we have been doing this for several years. It's not something new. They have a different name, yeah, a different agenda, but it's not new. We have been doing this for years, for decades. And then that the sustainability actions and programs has to be profitable. If it's not giving you something back, you're not going to implement that. So that's an issue. And then the commitment must be incorporated to the value chain, not just the big farmers. It has to be to the primary producers. And what happens in Guatemala is that we don't have, there is a lack of presence of the government in the local areas. So that's a big issue, a big challenge to the private sector. So they committed here to global policies, but then when we get to the local, it's really hard to implement because it's some commitments, it's hard to deal with, and they are not even giving us an opportunity or a chance to do it because it's something that it's hard to implement, there's not profitable, and they are not getting in the context. So they have to be, as government, in the local area too.
Excellent. And we are getting short on time, and I'm going to ask each one of the panelists to wrap up with a quick minute or so comment. But just before I go there, I'm just wondering if there's anybody in the audience that wants to ask a quick question of any of the panelists. That's how good you guys are. You've got them all. You've got them all well educated. So maybe Corb, I'll start with you, and we'll go across the panel. Just a quick summary of how what you feel that you really are getting out of this whole sustainability conversation in and around COP, but also in and around your industry.
Sure. Yeah. So I think we talk about social license, and as an agriculture producer, we need to have a social license to produce our products so the consumers feel good about eating it and drinking it, in our case. So I think part of the whole initiative has to involve communication, not only to our consumers, but to our farmers and to our governments and to everybody else. So this is an all-encompassing program that makes us better, more efficient producers. It speaks to our consumers' needs, it speaks to our planet's needs. And I think if we can create an overarching system that farmers feel a part of, it's something that we can get behind, be proud of, and encourage the next generation to take our farms and do even more. So this is a big picture thought of a multi-generational business that we can encourage continuous progress. So it's an exciting time, I think, to be a farmer and to be part of this sustainability movement.
It is sexy again, right? David, just maybe quickly, anything that you're excited about on how we can move the roadmap forward to incorporate some of the recommendations into our domestic policies? Any advice other than read the report and then enact it. But are there any little tidbits or nuggets that you think we can focus on in the early stages to really start moving that momentum?
Yes, I think that, you know, what we invite is different stakeholders in different countries to, starting in January, taking the roadmap, saying what it means for them, what should be the proposal, because I've said we have 120 action, but it doesn't mean that every country has to do something on the 120 action. And then even when you start to zoom in, it's really be specific. So see what it means for them, how it can be improved also, because the roadmap is not holy text, okay? There is mistakes, there is things that is going to change also because knowledge and practices change. Just to give you an example, in the energy sector, a few years ago, the International Energy Agency has proposed a roadmap. We have already revised it 3 times, for instance, including an important thing, because in some case, technology has moved so fast that what we were thinking will be something doable in 15 years is already there. And people adopt it because it works. So I think really we have to keep this, we have to follow how the world is evolving, but we have a sense of urgency also. What is good is that people are already doing things. They have not waited the roadmap to do things. This roadmap is just a way to see if some parts have been neglected and how all of these pieces fit together within country and at the end when we add up. Why the sense of urgency? In 2015, we had 600 million of people that was in chronic hunger. Today, we have 735. We have 3.1 billion people on Earth already today that cannot afford a healthy diet. 2015, the world was breaking 4 of the 9 what we call planetary boundaries. Today, we have already broken 6. So it's not like if we can wait, you know, 5, 10 years that people figure things out. We have to act, but act in a coordinated way, and to make sure that we are not feeding polarization, because the more people fight, the less they can do.
The more people fight, the less they can do. We'll take that one away. So, Bob, you know, CSRB is CRSB is you know one of the most mature initiatives we have in Canada, and so maybe you know this might be a difficult question to answer, but what do you see? How do you see your vision for it going forward changing now that you've gone through, say, a 10-year maturity period? From where you started to where you are now, where do you see it going in the next 10 years, and what kind of things do you hope it delivers?
I think where it needs to go, well, that is a tough question.
The easy answer is more of the same, but is there something in your mind that you can help it mature even more to deliver more to your producers and to the consumers?
The easy answer is more of the same, and that's not the answer, and especially today. You know, and I'll go to, I can't give you a definite thing, but I'll go to something that I think Corb said, that farmers are adaptable, and they are, but I'm not sure how fast. You know, phrase was coined that the more technology you get, the faster you get more technology. I'm not sure if the bulk of producers are adapting as fast as they need to adapt to keep up in today's world, and that's, I believe the CRSB needs to be able to adapt ahead of the process, and it has been. I mean, we led it for a long time. It might be time to have another look and say, where can we go now to keep leading this? I mean, I don't know. That's for smarter minds than me to figure out. I think the benefits, you know, you come to COP here, and we've got producers at home that say, what are you wasting that much money for? It's, I'm here on checkoff dollars. That's a complete waste of money. I'm with Corb. This is a pretty exciting time to be in agriculture right now. The world has just finally figured out, or the policymakers of the world, that we need food. And we need every kind of food, and we need every kind of food system produced in a sustainable manner, which is the worst word on the planet in my mind. It's got way overused, but we need to produce food with more with less, and this is kind of where it all comes together. You know, and I heard a very good friend of mine who happens to be sitting in the center of this room coined the phrase, if you aren't at the table, you're probably on the menu. I think that's true, and we need to take that back to producers everywhere that say, yeah, we need to be there. And it's been working. This COP to me is better than the last year's COP. Food is primarily what they've been talking about that I've been hearing. So,
And Marlene, just from your perspective with the chamber, and realize this has only been an hour-long conversation on a year-long conversation that we should have, but is there anything that you can take back from what you've heard from the Canadian perspective with respect to sustainability, or is there any advice you can give to my colleagues on the panel about what you've been doing that they might want to consider implementing in Canada?
Well, today I heard really good practices. Definitely, I'm going to talk with them just to get to some of these good practices to Guatemala. I think our sectors has a lot to learn from them, and maybe just to encourage to be in the table. I think that message you already kept from me, that you have to be on the table and not in the menu. So these are a powerful phrase we can encourage to go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, the constant theme I heard from everybody was that education piece. And I know as farmers, we are constantly talking about getting our message out to consumer. I think my own view of that is we have to stop speaking farmer speak and start speaking consumer speak, so that we're speaking in the consumer's language to make sure they understand our industries and the practices that we're doing. So wonderful panel. Appreciate everyone's time and everyone's input. It was great. Can you please join me in thanking our panel today?